Welcome to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why. Good evening and welcome to Pause for the Truth. I am your co host, Jocelyn Turner. What a lovely, lovely evening. We have the behind the scenes guy, Tyrone Jackson, joining us as one of our co hosts while we're waiting on Dr. Kane to join us. It's not while we're waiting on Dr. Kane, because I'm not trying to imply behind the scenes guy that you're going to drop off when Dr. Kane comes on. But thank you for coming from behind the scene, Tyrone, behind the scenes guy Jackson. How you doing this evening, Tyrone?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you very much for asking. As always, it's a pleasure to unshackle the chains you guys have me in behind the scenes and come to the forefront.
Well, truth be told, Tyrone, just in case our listeners don't realize it is we meet as a team to talk about what topics we want to do from week to week. And we've talked about done some brainstorming and talked about what we want to do in 2023. I want to first start out, Tyrone, by kind of reflecting some of the topics that we've talked about and why we came together doing this thing. Somebody made the comment to me that you're so busy, you're just working all over the place. I was like, this isn't work. This is my opportunity to educate, which is my passion. As you heard from the intro, I am a health educator, and it's just always been my passion to enlighten people, hopefully sharing information that they didn't know. Is there any, one, I'm going to start out, but I'm gonna let you think about it while I start out by asking, is there any particular topic that of all the things we've talked about, because guess what, Tyrone, we are on podcast number 70,
Yay!
70. Can you believe it? And
Yes,
so,
yes.
I just like to ask you what podcast stuck out the most for you. And I'm going to start since I'm putting you on the spot. There are two actually. I couldn't decide which one was the most impactful to me, but the one we did on climate change, because there are things about the climate that I never knew, nor had I ever thought about. Now I'm one of those people, although I get annoyed, like I just did it just now. I put my recycle bin out. So I am one of those people who, you know, will recycle, but I'm still bad, Tyrone, because I'm using the plastic regularly, like daily. And people have bought those reusable water bottles, and I just forget to do them. And I really need to. And I know the reason why. Um, you know, I've been places, for example, that didn't have fountains that I could
Mm.
refill, and so that's why I got in the habit of bringing that. And the second podcast that was impactful to me is the one on estate planning and wealth building.
Mm.
I've met so many people who've lost loved ones and had no idea about their loved ones' finances and the business of being an individual. Because to me, as an individual, we are a business. Because when our business closed, which means when the good Lord takes us home,
Right,
there
right.
is there are things that that our family or those beneficiaries have to do to close our business, right?
Yes.
And oftentimes people are not aware what to do. And even, in that show, when we talked about estate planning, we talked about wealth building as well, because all of us want to get to a point other than, doing the scratch off or playing the half a billion lottery. Because, oh, yes, I did that today too on the way home, Tyrone. um, we do have to work in order to gain wealth in our family. So we can come back to my topics, but tell me, what topic stuck out to you the most this year?
Yeah, I'm glad you gave me an opportunity to think about it. I would like to comment first of all on the one that you said about the recycling. There was something that really threw me back in that episode when it was brought to our attention that even though we separated our recycles in Jacksonville, that the city was not recycling those goods. That was
That
that
was
was that was kind of like an eye opener, and it made me think, and it still makes me think every time I go to throw something in my recycle bin. You know,
me too,
so
Tyrone.
wanting to be responsible, wanting to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem, but feeling every time that my effort is in vain because as a whole the city is not. So that was I'm glad you mentioned that one. It kind of took me, but I kind of looked at it the same way, and I had a few shows that came to my mind that were um very informative for me, insightful, and gave me an opportunity to learn some things that I had known. And I'm going to bring Dr. Kane in, then I'll complete. All right, so there's Dr.
Oh, a wayward doctor has appeared.
Kane. So I actually put together a list, Miss Johnson. You know, I try to do
Okay.
things in a little bit more different, and it was very difficult. Having done 70 shows means that there was a great deal to choose from.
Mhm.
And the one that was very insightful for me, gave me information, was Obamacare.
Mm.
Primarily because I not at that age or need, and I'm not involved in anyone who is who has those kind of things. So a lot of that information was new to me. Okay. Now the one that really did the predatory home buying and lending struck quite a few chords.
Mhm.
As we have citizens all over, and we're speaking primarily Jacksonville, are struggling for all kinds of things. They're opportunistic individuals who are taking advantage of the financial circumstances. So that truly struck a chord with me as well. And then we had the silent suffering victims of domestic violence. Having grown up with two sisters and being one of the three boys, our sisters grew up pretty tomboyish. And some of the things that I learned in there, and the guests that we had on there were very helpful in painting a picture of just one, how frequent this happens, two, how difficult it is for individuals to just decide to walk away and step away from that um, that environment. So that was kind of very enlightening for me. Now I'm not going to go through this entire list. I have it on the screen so those can listen. Now that we have Dr. Kane in, we definitely want to get his opinion as to the ones that shows that he found to be informative.
Yeah, you just reminded me of Dr. Kane. Before you chime in, I asked Tyrone of all the topics, we're on 70, podcast 70. And of all the ones, which ones is, kind of stuck in your mind? And I told him climate change and the wealth building and estate planning are the two. But when he shared the list, I'm like, oh yeah, oh yeah. But wow, we talked about a lot of good things. So Dr. Kane, what topics of all the ones that we've done, which really kind of stuck out for you, the past, kind of stayed on your mind, if you will?
Well, um, I will have to say somewhat ditto to both of you guys. Good evening, first of all.
Good evening.
Sorry I'm running late. We got to do a show on running late, um, which tends to be some of what happens to us. But when you got your day job and you're trying to make this happen, it can be challenging to be on time, particularly trying to get through Jacksonville's traffic.
But if we do something about climate change, then that will alleviate traffic. But I digress.
Well, climate change is stand out for me. And I mean, it's, uh, um, you know, when a lot of these topics were very passionate to me, and as well as you guys, because that's one of the reasons we came up with these topics, because they were things that were on our mind, things that we thought our guests would be interested in, some things that guests actually got to us, sent to us that they would like to hear from. You know, everything from, and I'm not going to say every show, but boy, we had a plethora of shows that were very interesting. They challenged all of us, you know, to do better about whatever the topic was about. You know, when Tyrone talked about, sorry, Ms. Turner, when you talk about estate planning, that's a challenging topic, and particularly with many of us having geriatric, super geriatric parents. I'm geriatric, so so super geriatric parents. That was something of great concern and great interest on my behalf. Climate change is a scary one because I'm more concerned. You know, what I really have to be worried about with the climate change and all of us, probably more to our kids and grandkids, is going to be the big challenge. What kind of world are we going to leave them?
Yes.
You know, as it relates to climate and climate related activity. But a lot of it seems to, we did quite a bit on voter suppressions. Boy, I started counting the number of the shows we did as it relates to voting. And I came up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 8 or 9 of them that we did just on voting or related to the voting topic, which circles back to climate change, because now you got politics. That part of the reason we haven't addressed climate change is very political. I'm gonna call it geopolitical from the fact that because they're digging oil out the ground and we using carbon fuel for that oil, it is raising havoc on Mother Earth and our planet. And at what point do we get that we all get concerned enough to be worried about? I don't need to worry about what kind of money I got. I need to worry about being able to breathe. You know, futuristic. I like what we did a lot of shows on COVID, especially early on. Because, you know, I would say that we have educated, we did a great job. And you notice I keep saying we did a great job at bringing the public's attention to COVID, encouraging people to get vaccinated. For many of them who have. I heard from people, and they talked about when we were talking about COVID and religion, that stuck out for a good while.
Yeah.
That time, you know, people really, they really loved that broadcast. So I was happy with that. And I did go care planning, like what you mentioned, Ms. Turner, talked about care planning. And then, of course, one of my passions, just, you know, what I really like is the future of healthcare. You know, so politics and medicine and the future of healthcare, because, you know, I'm not going to say everything, but many of what we've done all come back to a society that has to find ways to survive and try to, you would love to eliminate the politics in medicine, the politics in healthcare. But as long as we got a capitalistic economy, that becomes very difficult to eliminate those concerns. So I know I'm all over the place, but that's our broadcast. That's what we were all about.
I'm sorry, Tyrone. For those of you who are just chiming in, I have to always say that if you have a thought about any, and you know, we are fortunate to have some folks who tune in every week. So if there's a topic that you would like to bring up, maybe that, you know, post us a comment, or either dial in and join the discussion, 888-669-1280. And I would like to take this moment to thank our, you know, those folks who, and they know who they are, I won't call their names out, who tune in every week, week after week, and they've shared with their family and friends, because they feel that this is a platform that they could learn. And they've learned a lot. People have shared with me, you know, outside of the podcast to say, thank you all for doing this. I've shared it with my church family and my own family, and you all really talk about topics. But the one topic, Dr. Kane and Tyrone, that I'd like to toss out to you and ask, when we talk about racism and the impact, structural and institutional racism, when we've brought it up from time to time, it's a topic that is very sensitive to folks. But the thing that I like that we've tried to impart upon people is, although it is in the past for youngsters, if you will, or so they think, it's just different now. It's more institutional than it may have been so blatant before. But people have to understand that we bring it up because there are so many deficiencies in our communities that, things that we take for granted and that other communities take for granted that they have, that are just lacking in our communities. Some people have said where they work, there's no place that they could go to get a healthy lunch, for example, if they run out of the house without their lunch. There's no place around that they could grab something healthy. I was talking to a chef last week. Chef Amadeus even mentioned that he's been in communities and there's no place that he could grab something healthy to eat on his lunch break. And then we've talked about, and if we didn't talk about it, we need to talk about it when it comes to fair housing, talking about people who get their homes appraised. Dr. Phil did a couple of shows on it recently, talking about the variations in how much a home is appraised for African Americans versus others. So I'd like to just share with people that we bring it up, not to be, angry people, but to more, just like we do with everything else, to enlighten people, because there are things that are happening that people don't think about. We had, for example, some folks talking about, the disparities that exist when it comes to not just, with maternal health, child health. Dr. Kane has had numerous conversations with me about, his elderly patients who have to drive further and further to get those special tests that he may have to send them to. And so there are things that people don't think about that may not impact you, but if we're a society, one of the things that the mayor has put out on the city's website is one city. And to some people, it's not one city, because the same resources that are in some communities are not available in other communities. What are your thoughts, Tyrone and Dr. Kane, on that?
Well, I'll take that. And it's always interesting when we have these conversations, because one of the things that in our original design was not to avoid a subject for fear of what it would do or say. We only attempt to report and to give people information from experts that has factual bias. All right. So throughout the course of the 70 shows, we've never talked about something in the way that it didn't exist. We didn't make up the things. We didn't make up the injustices. We only reported them, and in a sense to give our listeners, our viewers, an understanding that these things still exist. And then it happened to me recently while talking with some young men, and we were talking about movies. Now, stay with me, please, everyone, because it's going to seem like I'm going off kilter, but I'm on target here with Miss Jocelyn's question. And the question was, can you think of a movie that currently or at that time had a cast of more than 3 Black men in the movie?
With being a positive role model, especially.
Not even that. Just dealing with issues and situations that they're faced with. And it was quite a challenge to come up with those movies. But one that was brought to mind was Do the Right Thing, that was done by Spike Lee. Now, for those of our viewers who are of age and saw that movie, there's a scene in there where Radio Raheem is killed. Well, this is way before George Floyd.
Right.
So as I was explaining to these young men is that the issues have not gone away. They continue to repeat themselves over and over, thus the value of making sure that everyone is aware of it. And they were like, no, that ain't happening. That's all new. And we actually went to YouTube, pulled up the video, and it was like, oh, that's almost exactly what happened.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And,
You know,
and
go ahead.
no, and so that's how I pulled those two that's how I pulled those two together. We're not poking at the society, we're only bringing to light what we observe and what others could see if they would just take the time.
As they say, history does repeat itself in many forms and many fashions. The disparities, you know, my kids, be honest with you, they didn't experience the well, at least not overt, they did not experience the overt racism that I experienced, but especially their grandparents, generations before me. Okay. And I made it sure my kids understood that, you know, there are going to be challenges in life in which it won't be because of your ineptitude, your lack of intelligence, but simply going to be based on the color of your skin. You know, you walk into a room and nobody looks like you stand out. And you know, there are some things that some of their non-Black, non-brown friends, things that they face that their Caucasian friends, which they got a lot of them, and they don't even doesn't even challenge them, or it doesn't come, they don't understand what it means.
Right.
They always, you know, kind of like, well, you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. But then they realize that some of them may realize that, you know, you can't peel your skin off and hope to walk into a race neutral world, because how do you define race is one of the first things it is. How do you define Black? You know, that's one of the things, racism in medicine, that we are I think we're going to delve into that topic for 2023. And Jocelyn, that goes along with your institutional racism, because racism in medicine is an institution. And those other institutions, such as hospitals, that seem to be divesting, and we'll talk about that in 2023, divesting themselves out of the Black community, because taking care of a community that has the disparities regarding access to health, like in where I love to practice at Jacksonville Northside, is, you know, that's not allowing some of these institutions to make the kind of money they want to be able to make. So they're divesting themselves away from the Black community and going more into some of the richer communities. I'm not going to even say white communities, but just the richer communities. And we saw that myself and a lot of my colleagues in Northeast Florida Medical Society, the older ones, we saw how racially divided healthcare was, especially like when I got here in '85. This city was so divided as it related to healthcare, who had access to healthcare. It has improved some, but it's still pretty evident access to good healthcare.
And I think this is a great lead in, if I will, Dr. Kane, jump in here. And because I had this up, as we try to do some preparation for the show, we try to do some research. And even as our show today is about our episodes and our shows, we still did some research. And I pulled this here up right here. And I think this is very, very appropriate for what you're asking, Ms. Johnson. Because this was our vision. This was a simple, when the three of us got together, and only the three of us know the challenge it was for that at the beginning. And it says, pause for the truth, envision a community where everyone is fully aware of the circumstances and the situations that may influence their ability to thrive. This podcast seeks to inform and to educate the community by featuring subject matter experts on topics of health, legal, social justice. We have no greater passion than that of educating friends, family, and community. Join us. So I think that is what you were asking.
That's beautiful. Boy, we're awesome, aren't we?
Hey, hold up. So you put the better looking person on it. You got to put us ugly people on there too.
And Dr. Kane, see, never be careful what you ask
what you ask for, right?
Be careful what you ask for. As I was preparing, of course, I had information with regards to that as well.
Because you knew he was going to say something, right?
Absolutely. Even if only for the human comic value of it. But so I then had something prepared for that as well. So this here is just an idea so that our listeners understand that we took the responsibility of communicating to the community seriously. We looked at what it is we wanted to get accomplished. We created a vision statement, and each and every time we put together an episode, we try to stay true to that vision.
It's that last one on put that back up, Tyrone, real quick, not because the ugly guy's up there, but that last line really speaks volumes as to what we're trying to do and what we're asking our audience. And it's pretty simple. Join us as we spread the truth about what's happening in the world today.
Yes.
That's why we ask you to pause for the truth. Take time to help us deliver the truth, whether it's while we're on the show, after the show, before the show, but join us and help them to deliver it. And so that's why when Ms. Turner was asking our listeners, please help us in discovering what topics you want to hear about, so that we can go out and seek the truth as best as we can find it. Yesterday I read an article from a guy, I'm trying to remember his name. Anyway, he wrote something in the Florida Atlantic, and it was all about COVID, and he started raising all kinds of issues about the validity of what was being reported by the Biden administration, and he says the Trump administration. But it was so convoluted in terms of what he was saying. He was all over the place. I couldn't get what the message was supposed to be. So we're most certainly trying to deliver a message that I must say is concise, but at least we want to make it as truthful as what we could find, and deliver it to the people, not only the ones who really want to listen to us, but deliver it as non-biased as possible.
Yes.
Depending on the subject matter.
And one thing that I've gotten feedback from people on is that we have people who, people never thought about, and I've said it all the while, and we used to joke about it, who should be in your friend circle, right? You should know a doctor, a lawyer, a mechanic. We just talked about the different, plumber, we talked about handyman, different, and of course a computer guy, right? But one thing that I've shared with people, as you are diagnosed with a disease like high blood pressure and diabetes and heart disease and high cholesterol, is that you need not only your physician, your primary care physician, but you also need a registered dietitian, you need a fitness person, you need a mental health person, because all of that helps to create the balance and help you to, all of them impact your ability to manage your chronic health conditions. And someone said to me recently, I'm not going to call their name, they said that they learned from Linda Brown last week, the registered dietitian, something that it bothered them that they never learned from their physician. And I told them what was shared with me years ago. Physicians may get a class or two in dietetics, right? Registered dietitians, that's what they learn, right? They learn all about all the aspects of food. So we're not suggesting that one person replaces the other. What we've tried to impart upon people is, first of all, understand what your health insurance plan covers, which is why we've had those persons to come on to talk about Obamacare, Medicare, and other things, because you need to know what your health insurance covers. Because some people I've shared with, they didn't know that going to a registered dietitian is the same as going to their OBGYN, for example, or going to your urologist. In other words, it's just another health coverage that's a part of your plan, but they didn't realize the importance of why you should go to a registered dietitian, nor did they realize, and I shared with folks about my diabetes journey, and the first people I called were, other than Dr. Kane, of course, and my great physician who shared the bad news, which she really didn't have to share it because I already knew what was happening. She just verified it. But I called my friends who are registered dietitians, and I called my friend who's a personal trainer, and my brother, right? What can I do to do this thing? And I've shared with people. Thankfully, and I'm gonna knock on wood or particle board that I'm knocking on, that by listening to folks, listening and hearing what they said and applying what they shared with me to do, I've not in 3.5 years had to get on medication, right? And so when you're diagnosed with a disease, that's the other thing we've tried to share with people. Other than asking your physician, what medication do you need to get on? What else can I do to help manage this chronic health condition? Now, there are some diseases that people are diagnosed with. Medication is the only answer.
Yes.
And that's fine that you have that option. But when it comes to diseases like diabetes and high blood pressure and high cholesterol, those are things that we could do something about, not just rely on the medication. So that's the other thing that I wanted to mention, that our bragging moment is that we've tried to bring, a multidisciplinary team of health professionals on, health and wellness professionals on, who have shared their knowledge and talking to people. One of the things that when I asked them, when we were talking about, because Tyrone said the preparation we do, we talked about moving forward. What are some things that we want to accomplish in 2023? So of all the things that, we talked about wealth building, we talked about managing your diabetes, and, so Tyrone, I'm going to toss it to you first. What are some things that you like?
Give me just before you go from that, because you struck a real important point that I've been teaching and preaching about for the last 10 years at a minimum, with multidisciplinary team, is that as a physician, particularly as a family practice, we're supposed to be the gatekeepers, the leaders in terms of your care, yada, yada, yada. But, one of the things I try to tell patients and my other physician friends and some of the people that, whether or not the ARNPs or physicians in training or pharmacists, is that the old days where physicians wore so many hats, that, you couldn't find their head. I mean, they wore the social worker hat. They wore the dietitian hat. They wore the nursing hat. They wore the pharmacist hat. They did, just so many hats that they were wearing, in that we failed at that time, but we have since that time begin to realize this is, as you said, a multidisciplinary approach to taking care of people. And and the last thing I'm gonna comment is on one of the other things that you said, is that you don't want to have to take medicine if you can. What you got to do is get out ahead of the disease before you get the disease.
Yeah.
Preventative medicine is the best route to stay as healthy as you can, and be quite frank with you, in many cases, as wealthy as you can. Because if you spend all your money on taking drugs, you know, and I don't mean illicit drugs, you know, I can't
Right, right.
but if you spend all your money on taking legitimate drugs to help with your blood pressure, help with your cholesterol, you know, I think I share with people, you know, the average has been determined that the average Black person needs about 4.5 medications to control their blood pressure. Not need, let me change that. Use 4.5 medications to control their blood pressure. If they really address things in a mannerism much like what you did, in which, you know, all it took was one little bell that rung in your head that say, keep it up, you're gonna be a diabetic on medications, on insulin, yada, yada, yada. And you said, that's enough for me, let me get my act together. Your words, not mine. Let me get my act together. And that's how you met, and you consulted a multidisciplinary team in terms of your care, which is the right way to do things. That's why I try not to be a dietitian. I can give my little 2 cents in an office while I can, but I only got so much time to be able to do it. I need all these other people to take very good care of a patient. And what we just have to do is get an understanding and promote to our audience that let's all work together. Don't just depend on your doctor, because nobody should care more about you than you.
And there's something that we cannot do anything about. We can't choose our parents, right?
Nope.
It's too late for that. So we can't do anything about our genetics or our hereditary traits.
Right.
But the things that we can do something about, those are the things that we've tried to focus on with this show. Those things that you get when we had the OBGYN on, she was talking about, you know, taking care of yourself before you make the decision to get pregnant, right? That preconception health. Make sure you take care of yourself. But the thing that we've talked about, getting back to, they're just resources that are not in communities to help promote positive or healthy lifestyle behavior, right?
Promote
Let
wellness.
me chime in real quick there, because I think you said a very important thing, Ms. Jocelyn, and you said promote. That doesn't mean that these things aren't available, because we brought forth to our listeners' attention, they're available. They're just not promoted to the degree to let you know. So a person of conscious mindset can find them, but we want to make sure that everyone is aware of them.
So Tyrone, what are some things when we were discussing tonight's show? What are some things that stuck out that you said, you know, we need to get back to, or we need to move to step 2 or part 2 of that discussion? Anything come to mind for you?
Well, the one thing that continued to be a challenge as we did all of the 70 episodes was time. The idea and the concept originally of the show was 1 hour. And I think, at least in my mind, when we started it, I felt 1 hour was going to be enough time to talk about the subjects.
Yeah.
But the complexity of the subjects that we've chosen to tackle make them extremely difficult to cover in an hour's time. We've had gracious guests who have, just because of the flow of the conversation, have decided to stay on with us, 10, 15 minutes after. But one of the biggest challenges, and one of the things that I look forward to, some of the things we plan to put in place with regards to the length of the show, is reverse understanding of how to disseminate the information to the listener.
Yeah, I think from the beginning, I was smiling, as you guys both know, because one of the things that I kept advocating at the beginning, we're gonna need more than an hour. We're gonna need more than an hour. And it came to fruition because I knew what you guys had to add. The importance of both you guys' opinion, your concerns, things that you wanted to address. That if we just talked amongst ourselves for that amount of time, it would take an hour. And we're trying to elicit or whichever, solicit additional help from the experts so that we don't miss anything. And again, those experts, I know that we value their time, but boy, it goes by so quick because we all get and we become indulged in the conversation so intensely that before we know it, Tyrone is saying, you need to wrap it up. Our listeners may not see it, but we see it's like we're coming up on an hour. It's almost time, and then sometimes it just does no good because we just keep going on. And many of our guests have been gracious enough to allow us to go beyond what we told them it would be. But that does bring up, Ms. Turner, the idea of a second hour, and I'll let you guys elaborate on.
Well, I'll just share that I have been kicking and screaming to say, let's keep it an hour and just have a part 2 show, right? And the reason that I say it is because I know some people are just getting off work. They're trying to have dinner and now we're asking them to stick around for a couple of hours. So that's why I thought that we should just stop at an hour. And if we need to continue the discussion next week, then we can do that because we don't want to go, on and on and on. And then, I understand if we run over a few minutes, but just to say it's a 2-hour podcast, I just didn't think it was the best use of time for people knowing that. And for people who have children coming home, having to get dinner and homework and even with ourselves and persons who need to try to manage their chronic health conditions, if you don't get home to get something to eat, by the time we finish, then you're eating too late at night to lay down.
You may be in trouble otherwise.
Right. Yeah. So that's why I said that's why I've been advocating for an hour, but certainly okay if we go over as well. So what are your thoughts behind the scenes, Guy?
Well, I agree with you, Ms. Jocelyn. I think time management is a challenge for us all as we work to balance work, life, living, health, and all the things that we talk about on the show. So I think our listeners and our viewers are gracious enough to give us an hour out of their time. And I think it is, I don't want to take light of that. I think it's important, though, that we stay true to the goal, and that is to disseminate the information. If that means then that we need to have a second show, a part 2 show, then we need to be prepared to do that and need to let our listeners and viewers know in advance. One of the things that we talked about as a team that I very much like as well is on certain shows, flipping the way we talk about it. Let's start with the things that you can do to help to solve or to be a part of the solution for what we're going to talk about, and then talk about it. There have been far too many times where we've started off explaining the situation, which everyone already knew. And then we get to the end, we're running out of time, and we have very little time to explain or have our guests to give the solution, the direction, the things that can be done. There's some things that can't be done, but in almost every show we've done, there is something that our professionals have said that can be done. And I would prefer not to run to the end of the show with that.
Yeah, I agree. And there are even some TV shows I see that, I know those HGTV shows where they spend 55 minutes showing you how they remodel a house, and then they'll give you a 3-minute view of the house, right? I digress, but it just made me think about that. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about, we've done 70 podcasts and, talking about various things from, finances to different health conditions. We started out talking about COVID. We talked about climate change. You name it. We've done a variety of topics. dial in or send us type in a message for us right now and just give us some ideas on things you'd like for us to talk about in 2023, even if it's a repeat. The past weeks we've, talked about, last week we had, our guest on talking about healthy eating for the holidays. Before that, we talked about the maternal health disparities. Before that, we just really been talking about, technology, the show that I was not on, and Tyrone and Dr. Kane did something on technology. Give us an idea of what you'd like for us to talk about, or if there's a topic that we discussed in the past, dial in now, post a comment in the chat to let us know, hey, can you talk about that again, or the thing that struck out the most for you throughout the year. I know some of you who have my personal contact information, you've texted me and talked about it. Thank you. The podcast on music as a method to connect and relate to multiple generations was interesting as well. And to our guests, that was a tough one for me. I've shared with Dr. Kane and Tyrone, when we talk about something that's out of my scope or realm, I'm a health educator, right? So music, but you're right, music does connect people, generations. Tyrone, we had Tyrone's son on one time, and we've been told, by the way, from folks that, we're old and we should have a younger co-host. And my joking comment to people, like, the youngsters can get their own show. We're doing our podcast for who we are, to share all the knowledge that we've learned and over the years and accumulated. But certainly, thank you, Ms. Brown, for your comment. And we definitely can have the gentleman back on, because they're very passionate about music. And we'll have a different twist and have somebody on to serve as co-host who knows about it more than we do. And that can really generate the kind of conversation that we've had. Is there any other topic, though, Tyrone, that you've had, or Dr. Kane, you've had with the younger generation that they said, hey, you all should talk about? One thing I know that we've said we should talk about is relationships. It's a topic that we've kicked around, like, we need to talk about relationships, because, and then I also think we should talk about social media and how people communicate on social media. Or my mom always said, don't text me, pick up the phone and call me, right? And really the way we communicate with one another is just not what it used to be. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's funny you should say that. I had one of the things on the social media, blessing or curse.
Yeah, really.
I mean, if it wasn't for social media, maybe some of the things like what you guys mentioned with George Floyd, and maybe some of those things would not be as exposed as what we would like. When Rodney, what's his name? Rodney King. That was what happened with Rodney King and the exposure. Even though right now it seems somewhat antiquated because it was an old video camera and stuff, compared to what we're looking at with social media, that helped keep, to a great degree, keep some of the things that were being done to underprivileged, underserved Black and brown people, and helped expose that, and of course, because we've had police on the show, not all policemen are bad, and so and so and so, but it helped expose the power of police that they had when their word against the victim's word. It was always the police was right. There was no question about it to the non-Black and brown community that person must have done something for the police to do that. And even though Rodney King was kind of the forerunners of, what was going on with that, in terms of exposing that, his whole episode, today, that seems like it's, I don't know, prehistoric in terms of what we see these days with everything that goes on with injustices that people face, whether it's the police, whether it's Karens or Tims or whomever it may be. You know, there's a lot of exposure. So that's a blessing somewhat of social media. The curse winds up being that people saying things that are not true, not validated, and they promoting untruths, unlike possible truth, but they're promoting a whole lot of untruth about what's going on in society. Blessing or curse?
I'll tell you one of the things we have to be careful with them. Because as I just earlier this week talked to some friends that we get together on conversations, and this subject came up. And the subject I'm talking about is the social media aspect. And I will tell you something was said that allowed me to reanalyze my thought of youth and social media. One of the individuals on it said that he believes that my generation believes more in social media than his generation. And he said that he thinks we believe that because we associate the fact that his generation use it all the time. We give it greater value than they do. They understand. In essence, what he was saying is they understand that social media is just a tool. They also understand there is a great deal of ambiguity and misleading information in it. So just because I'm on my phone looking at Facebook, reading these things, does not mean that they affect me to the degree that you would think they do.
Of that people that I can agree with that, because I may look at Facebook because I want to see what other people are thinking, what other people are saying. Doesn't mean necessarily I believe it.
Right.
And I think one of the things that we're saying with our generation, since I'm above you two guys, and what I'm saying with our generation is that in my parents' generation, they're not looking at a lot of the social media along that line, because they're afraid of it. Some of them, they don't want to delve into the technology and stuff of that nature. But by the same token, some of my relatives and older than me will also say, well, I Google so and so, and this is what it said. And I'm going like, you can't believe everything that's on Google, and maybe it might not be called a social media, but it is a research engine.
Yes.
And too many people are trusting that research engine because it's on Google, in particular us older folks. But I can tell you, it's a whole lot of younger folks out there that go for, they're promoting so many untruths. It's not even funny. When I say younger folks, I don't mean they got to be the 20s, 30s, 40s. And I got some just a few years younger than me promoting garbage on those social media platforms. So I think we just might need to make sure when we do something on social media that maybe the best way to do is help people discern what's true, give them knowledge as to where to go research the truth. Should you see something on social media that is maybe total quackery, but because it was on that social media, they need to validate it or invalidate it. So
I think the first thing that you said is the difference between social media and search engines. So I know, for example, I've taught my mother to use Google to look for stuff, right? But it might be a recipe or a store or something like that. But then when you talk about social media, it would be Facebook and Twitter and those other things. So that's the very first differentiation. Excuse me, I think we need to make. We tend to group them together when in fact they are separate entities, right? Going to Google for a search engine or Safari or some of these other places for search, using them as a search engine versus going on looking to see, because some people have they booed up from social media, from Facebook. They've reconnected with a long lost love, right?
Yeah.
And got married. So there are positive things that happen from
Oh,
social
most
media.
certainly.
But the dark things that happen on social media and is bullying. For example, we talked about bullying, how youth bully each other on social media. We've talked about how adults bully each other on social media. We've talked about the dark side of politics on online. I'll say online, right? Because it is used in different platforms. But I'll have to say to you all, as I say to all of our guests, we're nearing the end of our show. At the end of our show, we like to give our guests an opportunity to give their final thoughts on what we've talked about tonight. So I am going to start with Tyrone, since he is the behind the scenes guy who's now who's now on the front end of the podcast. As we end 2022, what are your final thoughts about 2022 and as it relates to our podcast or just in general, and what you'd like to see us to focus on in January of 2023?
Well, first of all, I'd like to just say thank you. It has truly been a joy, not only doing the podcast, but the conversations that we've had about some of the episodes, and some of them have never even made it to publication. But that conversation has been very informative and enlightening, and I look forward to some of them coming out. As I was thinking here, I was thinking, okay, Miss Johnson's going to do this. She always says, "What am I going to say?" I'm going to say something that I observed as we worked our way through 70 episodes. At some point in most of the episode, it comes down to a point, and that point is: here's the information. It's upon you now to use the information. And that's really, really, really important, because as a podcast, our job was simply in our title to get you to pause for the truth. Dr. Kane said it very eloquently, at the best that we can find the truth to be, by positioning and giving you experts in the field of the subject that we've chosen to give you the best opportunity. Well, it all boils down to you. And I say you, I mean myself, I mean Ms. Jocelyn, I mean Dr. Kane, and I definitely mean all of our viewers and listeners. It's up to you. Once you have the truth, it's incumbent upon you to use that truth. It's incumbent upon you to pass that truth on to others. Most of all, it's important for you to realize what the truth is and be able to discern that from all the other crap that's out there, whether it be social, whether it be social media, or whether it just be social. Because I got an Uncle Bob who tells great stories. That it ain't like Google, but it's just as fictional as Google. Okay. So that is the point that I would like to make to all our listeners. Continue to stay tuned for great new shows in the 2023 era, but be prepared to get involved and act upon the truth.
Thank you, Tyrone. That's wonderful. That's awesome. And Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts for tonight's discussion and moving forward?
Piggyback on what Tyrone says in terms of acting on the truth, I like for people also to come with their truth. Come to us with their truth, with seeking the truth and telling us what truly may be occurring, because we don't know all of it. When I mentioned Google and social media together, sometimes the things they put on Google, because you have so many choices, you may get access to lying social media. Is my point. When I group the two together in terms of validity and yada yada yada, and so I wouldn't forego Google because it, like what it says, it's a search engine. It can help you look for things. You know, Google is not trying to tell you what's the truth. It's just giving you, as what it says, a search engine toward things that you're looking toward. It doesn't say it's truthful, not truthful, but it just talks about publications and things that may occur. I would, you know, I think we need to, in the future, for some of our future shows, just like there's a suppression, a big effort at suppression of the of history. You know, one of the things that they want to relate to is CRT, critical race theory. It's like, okay, what's wrong with telling the truth about what happens, what happened? Okay, you're not, you know, when you talk about history, you can't make up history. You can lie, but you can't make up truth for history. Whether it's something you like or dislike, it still is history. And you don't know where you're going unless you know where you're coming from. You know, that's the only way you're going to find direction as to where to go. You know, you got to have a starting point, a reference point. And so part of what we're seeing and what is the big part of our show is history. It's based on history, what we've seen, what we've learned, and what we would like others to know. And, you know, we'll wait for them to form their own opinion, but let's at least get to them the facts, the truth. And it's not just political or racial, but medical, you know, personal, as in relationship, just whatever we can find to help our viewers and listeners, because we are being viewed as well as listened to. Viewers and listeners see, you know, what our efforts are in presenting the truth, and that what we need them to do, help us present the truth. One last thing, I got to give kudos to Tyrone in terms of our intro. You know, I look at some of my Northeast Florida Medical Society members, and for a few, you know, quite often, you know, I'm looking at when he put all that, the collage of those pictures and people together, you know, because I know them, you know, and when I first saw it, especially a few times thereafter, I'm going like, wait a minute, they're going to be on the show, but not realizing those are people, you know, that we had on the show. And they are, you know, they look good, especially since many of them are women, but they look good. I'm proud to be a member of the Northeast Florida Medical Society and the people that represent the Northeast Florida Medical Society, and hope that they will continue to try to serve the community for what we're all about, what our mission is, you know, what the National Medical Association mission is. And so, and let people understand the history behind what the Northeast Florida Medical Society means, what the National Medical Association, and so on and so on. One last thing, there's a couple of things when we talk about history, you know, a lot of people don't know how Medicare helped kill Jim Crow. That's a topic in which we can discuss with listeners in the future. With that, I digress and say thank you, Ms. Turner. Thank you, Mr. Tyrone. CallTyrone.net. Thank you, you guys, for being part of our family, and part of my family, and hope that, you know, we can move forward with a lot more interesting shows. I don't see it not happening, but I do want to make sure it's something that's still intuitive and very, not just intuitive. We need some entertainment as well, but also at the bottom line, presenting the truth.
Thank you, Dr. Kane, and thank you, Tyrone. My final thoughts for tonight and what I'd like to see us focus on, we've done several shows and talked about health disparities that exist in communities of color. I would like for us to really finally have the experts on who can say, here's what we all need to do in order to really have an impact on health disparities in communities. What is it that we really need to do if we really want to not have the disparities that persist in communities of color. That is my goal and hope that we have, that we do and achieve in 2023. To everyone who has stuck with us throughout the year, thank you for your patience. Thank you for working with us through our hiccups. And if you have not gotten your COVID vaccine or booster, please, ma'am, please, sir, make sure you do so. Hopefully you shared the holidays with your family members safely, and you did not spread any disease, and you only left gifts and fun times with your families and not the flu, RSV, or COVID-19.
Neither at my house.
So thank you again, and tune in next week as we begin a new year of Pause for the Truth. Happy holidays, happy new year, and take care, everyone. Good night.
Take care, everyone.
Good night.